Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whenever one is gonna listen to this. It is Wednesday, 11:22 a.m. in the morning, and I had a few rough hours. I've been coughing a bit, and wasn't feeling that great for the past like 4 hours. But I said I gotta get things going. I was having phlegm, and it was like an intense cough for like a prolonged period of time, a few hours, and on and off. But for the past 15 minutes, 20 minutes, I've been a bit better, but maybe it's gonna start again. So just a little bit of a warning that if I start coughing hard and basically I'm fighting, I don't know what exactly, maybe some a little bit of a flu or cold or some bacteria, germs, microbes. Always important to disinfect the hands when you go in the public. Keep the protocols of COVID, please. We're gonna have some coffee. We're gonna be using this little magic tool, and wash your hands often. Also washing hands off often, more often than usual. When you sneeze, when you cough, when you have those more sick, you're not feeling 100% best, to fight off those germs, bacteria, and microbes. So got a coffee. This is a thank you to my anonymous friend for gifting me this little coffee pot. Well, it's actually like a little coffee maker. Well, it's not really making coffee. It's like a filter, but it's very helpful. I don't have a coffee maker, so I'm gonna put some water. We're gonna get that rock and roll geopolitics going, as this is an emergency geopolitical event. And although I'm pretty joyous, pretty happy, content, smiling, but I gotta say that I am financially stressed. I am financially stressed. That is my very only stress now at the moment. Besides financial stress, I'm pretty in a good mood. I have my routines, my Asperger's routines. I do have high functioning autism, ASD level 1, and it's something that it's important for me to mention because my communication styles and the way that I discourse and interact with my fellow neurotypicals, you, the 99% of the population with which I have to build bridges with a small, medium, large, or extra large, might be a bit sometimes of a challenge. But I certainly improved my social skills, because that's what basically where we certainly, Aspies like myself, people on the spectrum of autism, certainly lack the social skills that are, in parentheses, required or considered normal by the 99% of the population, you, the neurotypical. So I also got to salute my fellow brothers and sisters in the Rainbow Nation. It is Pride Month, and myself, I am androgynous pansexual, and I've been out in the open for years and years and years now. It's not something that as long as I can remember, basically. But it is Pride Month, June, and gonna salute my fellow brothers and sisters, workers, the butchers, the bakers, the nurses, the doctors, the electricians, the plumbers, construction workers. Gotta send some rock and roll to the firefighters. It's not all about me. It's not all about us. Sometimes it's about me. It's about you, and it's about how we can work together and how we can find solutions to the different challenges that we are faced with, especially economic, financial. That is my predominant challenge. And of course, the geopolitical challenges, which are particular to where we are now. So we're gonna keep the discussion as it relates to geopolitics. If you're not interested in geopolitics, it's best or to not engage or not watch this video. If you want to learn about geopolitics, I encourage you to watch the video too. Although some of the theories, protocols, analysis will be a little bit more advanced, it will require some more knowledge, information, and intellect in the geopolitical sphere, as geopolitics has been a constant in my life for many, many, many years, as long as I can remember. Studying, analyzing, and sometimes I spend hours and hours and hours a day analyzing geopolitical events. And the geopolitical events which I'm going to discuss today are referential, and of course they are important for the North American Collective, for Canada specifically, for what I call the NORAD NATO complex. NORAD NATO complex. Our allies, our potential adversaries, and our outright open antagonistic conflicts. Geopolitics is my special interest, Asperger's, and before I do continue, I want to recommend two books on Asperger's. So these are books which I value, and I do recommend. Of course, if you're interested in, if you have somebody in your life, or a friend, co-worker, and please employ Aspies, because that's a big problem of my financial economic stress, is that 80% of Aspies are underemployed and unemployed. It has gone it has improved slightly from the 20th century, from the 90s, 80s, and 90s, and early 2000s. It used to be around 90%. So there has been some marginal improvement, but better some improvement than none. But even today, the unemployment rate for Aspies is 80%. Think about the horrible nature of that statistic. 80% of Aspies are usually underemployed or unemployed. And not all Aspies are good at computer science, but yeah, just like many Aspies, I'm above average in mathematics, and I always do mathematics. And of course, in all videos, I have to interject a mathematical question. But I want to recommend the books, and a third book, where the first one, I don't have it with me, I have to retrieve it, and I have the money set aside to go retrieve it maybe in the next 2 weeks or so. I'll have it. It's called Appreciating Asperger's Syndrome. Appreciating Asperger's Syndrome. Then I recommend this one is newly gifted from my anonymous friend, thanks to a anonymous librarian. But if I make a million a billion, I'm gonna give my anonymous friend half of that. And this is Asperger's from the Inside Out. Asperger's from the Inside Out. See, Asperger's from the Inside Out. It's a great, great, valuable book. This actually enhances my coping mechanisms, my understanding, my awareness, and my ability to build bridges with you, the 99% of the population, the neurotypicals, and especially this part here, I gotta say that it has been really, really helpful. It's just a few pages, but it shows how it's very clever intellectually, and it reflects a lot of the misunderstandings, a lot of our challenges, and a lot of our characteristics and traits that we have as spectralites, as Aspies, as citizens on the spectrum of autism. And you see there the characteristics. So it has three different sides. It's broken down in three parts. So you have the characteristic of somebody who's autistic, an Aspie. This is particularly for Aspies, for people on the with the condition known as Asperger syndrome. And the characteristics is an intense absorption in a topic or field of interest. For me, it's geopolitics and rock and roll, and sports and fitness with that, but dancing being my favorite sport. But pretty much geopolitics, rock and roll, geopolitics. The negative interpretation for how it can be seen. So these Aspies characteristics, how it can be seen, perceived by you, the 99% in neurotypicals, in a negative interpretation and in the positive one. And discomfort or inability at small talk. Yeah, I've certainly improved that, but it can be problematic. Inability to read nonverbal communications, just body gestures, shifting vocal tones, and of course the special interest for me is geopolitics. I can spend hours and hours a day. Sometimes I just don't don't realize that so much time has passed. Greater than normal abilities at math, science, art, or music. So generally, sure, but it's a great book, Asperger's Inside Out. So I'm not ashamed anymore. It took me years and years to accept it, And this one also I recommend, Teaching Asperger Syndromes, Asperger, Teaching Asperger Students Social Skills Through Acting All Their World as a Stage. It's a long title. It's more like a paragraph, but Teaching Asperger Students Social Skills Through Acting All Their World as a Stage. This is also a pretty good book. So fellow Aspies, rock and rolling, and we have work to do, and I like work. I love working. I work independently as an artist, athlete, and independent geopolitical theoretical analyst, theorist, philosopher, and strategist. And as I lift this coffee, I gotta salute the firefighters, the butchers, the bakers, the nurses, the electricians, the train conductors, those who picked up the garbage, the sanitation worker, public workers, because my dream is part of a mass public-private partnership concordia. Sometimes it's a bit academic, intellectual, but suffice it to say that I have been for years and years and years calling for the implementation of my Trinity activities across the North American Collective. And as Canada, United States, we have our common manifest destiny. So cheers to the daycare workers changing diapers now. I'm going to interject a little mathematical question. A little mathematical estimated question, or you can answer it precisely. But we're just going to do, before we get into geopolitics, we're going to do a relevant to geopolitical events, because some have such a big effect. Some geopolitical events have such a big effect on our national economy, our individuals. I mean, myself particularly, I do not drive, but let's take the price of gas now, because in the past 3 days we have seen that there's an escalation again. There's a return to open conflict, and there has been a helicopter which was downed by Iran, a U.S. helicopter, and thus United States responded by bombing Iran. So Iran also 3 days ago started during the weekend attacked Israel, the state of Israel, with missiles in response to what they have called the incursion into Lebanon and Hezbollah. And Hezbollah is a Iranian regime-backed militia, right? And the relationship of the ceasefire vis-a-vis the Strait of Hormuz being blocked since February 28 about has consequences. The consequences are that the price of gas has pretty much increased all over the world, right? And even there's shortages, even outright shortages now. Since there's math constantly around us, there's always mathematics. Now, in both Canada and the United States, the statistic is that there's 95% of cars run on gas and oil and petrol, right? Only less than five, around 3% are electric. Cars are electric. Less than five. And before I proceed with the mathematical question or estimation or imaginative mathematic, well, using imagination, but mathematics is based on clear, precise principles, right? Because some principles, mathematical principles, will apply, and there's something that equations have to be solved and calculations have to be performed according to mathematical logic, and in those areas, in those where we apply mathematics, such as in consumption, such as in the price of gas, right? For example, if I say a driver is putting 44.9 liters in its gas tank today. The gas tank has 50 liters, the gas tank, but to fill it up, it will put 44.9 liters. If the driver pays $1.83.9, how much will the 44.9 liters cost? And that's the question for today. I'm going to repeat it. So a driver puts, well, actually, I'm going to expand it as well. If a driver puts 44 liters, 44.9, make it 44.9, put some decimal points, 44.9 liters, so 900 milliliters, right? 0.9, I could say 0.93 or 0.93, 934, because we have mLs. 1 liter equals 1,000 milliliters, so it actually can be, let's say, 44.955. 44.955. We're gonna go to the milliliters, because it could still be pennies, right? It could still be a few cents calculated to the cents I wanted. Well, you can round it up. I mean, if you're off by 10 cents, I'm not gonna take points off as a mathematician, or if I will, I'm not gonna be that cruel in mathematics or that intransigent. But I will give you the full point. But not if you're off by a few dollars or more than 25 cents. A quarter I can slip. A quarter I can say, you were close by a quarter. But more than a quarter, no, like 50 cents, yeah, that's already, for more than a dollar, forget it. You have to be by a few pennies off and off. 5 cents, 10 cents, 15 cents, I can just give you the full points. I wouldn't take off marks, right, if I would be correcting the answer. But so a driver, let's say Hannah, puts 44.9, it is a decimal point, 0.955. So 0.955 is 955 milliliters. It's not a liter, it's almost a liter. Almost. So almost 45 liters, in other words. You can round it up if you want. I wouldn't mind 45. But I want more precision, because pennies add up, right? Pennies add up. A few there, they will add up to a dollar. If there's several cars with several cars will put 444 milliliters. If times 3, that's already 1.2 liters. So it adds up, right? The math. So that is the mathematical question. If Hannah puts 44.955 milliliters at the cost of $1.83.9, how much was the total? How much was the total? So you have to solve it according to mathematical principles that are pretty much, they're set according to those mathematical principles. So So you have to do some mathematical calculations, right? So the cost of 183.9, Hannah puts 44 liters and 955 milliliters. So 44.955 liters. So how much does it cost? And if Hannah would have put the same amount in early February, mid February, at the price of 151.9 dollars per liter, what is the difference? What is the difference? I want you to calculate the difference as well. So, because I went back in time for February, because February the price of gas was around 151.9. Yesterday it was 183. So it's about 33 cents more. That was yesterday from mid-February. Mid-February, I think it was around 150.9, or the average, around 150, $1.50. And even if we go back to 2019, average price of gas was around 93 cents. So you can see in the percentages how a big percentage of increase in the price of gas, it's double, right? Like double what it was 7 years ago. But the salaries have not doubled. And since many of us depend on our automobiles, cars, and oil, and petrol and gas to commute, to go to work, because sometimes we have big distances, and I mean, I'm referring to Canada, right? Other countries have different realities, but a lot of countries have similar realities of Canada. But I'm Canadian, North American. This is home for me. I'm a North American Canadian. This is my home, and actually, I haven't even left the island of Montreal for 7 years, to be honest. So as much as I am a world citizen, I can try to be a world citizen, a world peace advocate. I haven't even left the island of Montreal. It's a 2.5 million metropolis city, right? It's a 2.5 million metropolis city. 2.5 million. It's a big island, right? So having that awareness and that reality for me, that of course I was financially stressed. I had many jobs, I lost jobs. I had many jobs, I lost jobs. I made my In the past 11 years, my story was like many Aspies: losing friends, losing jobs, making friends, losing them, getting jobs, losing them. It's not just for me losing jobs and friends. It's for people like myself who live on the spectrum of autism, the Aspies, right? It's But I certainly improved my social skills and my awareness, because so from about spring 2015, I've been semi-officially diagnosed by several individuals. I just didn't want to accept it, the stigma. And only around October 2022, so it's been a little bit more than 3 years now, a little bit more than 3 years, 3.5 years. I guess around September, October is going to be 4 years since I've accepted and embraced it and learned the skills, learned by being aware and being aware of my difference, that the cognitive, the intellectual abilities, the Aspie traits, right? Which can sometimes, I had to learn the hard way myself, because certain traits are not meant to be, they're negatively perceived in the social sphere, and that might have consequences such as losing friends, losing jobs. And the whole concept of having a filter can be tough for Aspies. That sometimes it's necessary. So you learn. Hey, it's Asperger's. I'm different, and Aspies were different. Hey, so. But I certainly have the DD, disorder and disability, in parentheses, and then it's equated by the other parentheses, which is SS, social skills. SS, the social skills, the SS, right? So social skills. Well, the social skills we lack, that go into the disability and the disorder, but we have in other parentheses, we have the other SS, the special skills, right? So the social skills that we can improve and lack and go into the DD, the disability and the disorder, in many parts. But then the other parentheses is special skills, the other SS, special skills. So it's counterbalanced even to the positive side by the other parentheses, of which the social skills are reflected upon. So now we enter geopolitics. It's important to begin with my prediction of 2019. So for this, I have proof because I have the videos online. So in 2019, October 2019, I predicted that there will be an international conflagration in the coming years, right? And there's a lot of intellectual, academic, and scholarly analysis, and some of my theories can be a bit too intellectual, maybe, or for some, not for all, but for some, because I don't like generalizations, but because I'm also an individual, right? But there will be some that are more academic and require an inner knowledge of geopolitical events, which of course include history, trade relations, bilateral relations, organizations, and I specialize in the 20th century Cold War period, Cold War era period, and post 9/11. So basically, more modern geopolitics. I can go back in time to ancient Egypt, where I was in a past life as a woman, as a man, as a woman, my reincarnation. Sometimes that's why you get 50-50 now, due to my, I was the priestess Pythia who rated the Great Retreat Liturgus. I lived in the United States 3 times post 7076, twice as a man, once as a woman, and 2 different wars. I served in the United States military, United States Army. The wars were 156 years apart, and of course, if you read George Patton, Through a Glass Darkly, that's one of my favorite poems. George Patton, Through a Glass Darkly. So I certainly can, we can go back in time, but the more relevant is Cold War period and 9/11, the post 9/11 world, and the 20th century, because it formatted the 21st century in many ways. So that's more relevant for today, right? For the past years and for today and for tomorrow. So although I can go back, and certainly there's things that are from thousands of years that are, I mean, the pyramids remain, right? The pyramids remain, those tombs and temples, tombs and temples, tombs and temples. But nonetheless, I want to just focus on just a few geopolitical points today. One is starting with my prediction, of which I have the video. In 2019, in October 2019, I predicted that there was going to be an international conflagration. So we start with that point in time for the parallel reality of me having predicted what's happening now, and in consequence, all the work, the theories, the protocols, such as the CIT, Citizen Integration Theory, the DRT, Electoral Fusion Theory, and the DFT, Democratic Fusion Theory, which have to be implemented as a mass public-private partnership. Because my dream, the Dancing Goddess Dragon Kingdom, the fusion of Canada, United States into the Imperial Republican complex, is a basically a fundamental mass public-private partnership, right? A coalition, in other words, but a universal revolutionary centrist, because I always say for years and years and years I've said that I'm a universal revolutionary centrist, but you have to keep in mind that when I say a universal revolutionary centrist is North American centric, because this is tied in with my philosophy that we are a North American collective, right? A North American civilizational complex, and we're a new civilizational complex. We're not only divorced from Western civilization, but we're distinct. We're not divorced from Western civilization, but we have a distinction, and we're an emergent one, right? With our uniqueness and our distinctiveness, not necessarily that we're more advanced or better. That's not the idea behind it or the theories, because it's just that we're a new civilizational complex with our own internal unique dynamics, whether geographical realities or social cultural ones, historical ones, and collective destiny, what I call between, especially between Canada and the United States, our common manifest destiny. And of course, Mexico is part of the North American collective. Mexico, Haiti, Dominican Republic, Jamaica. Cuba is a paradox because they're socialist communists, but they're part of, the islands are part of the North American collective. And in the North American civilizational collective, the twins, Canada and United States, we have the common manifest destiny. And I always have to mention, because to my young uncle Carney, the king is absent. Uncle Carney pledged allegiance last year to the King of England and his heirs. Think about that. Uncle Carney pledged allegiance to the King of England and his heirs. Just think about that for a moment. In 2025, Uncle Carney did not pledge allegiance to the citizens, peoples of Canada, and those all who come to join us. Well, in the Confederation, because we were founded as a confederation, not a federation, really. But to the King of England and his heirs. I would say that we should have been a republic on the 1st of January, the year 2000, a republic, because that should have been left to the 20th century. The King of England and his heirs, and the Governor General, all respect to the new Governor General that was this week, yesterday, that, and of course, I understand economic financial pressures. I don't want to take anybody's jobs or positions, but they can be replaced. They can be find alternative, similar purposes. But without the, we should have left the monarchy and the King of England, and it would have passed. We should have been a republic a long time ago. But nonetheless, it's something, of course, that gotta go. So the realities of today, as I'm going to say, Uncle Connie's speech of Davos, the French version, I'm going to say it in French. And at the beginning, Davos speech, that what Uncle Connie said, I predicted it back in October 2019. So when Uncle Connie said in French, c'est la fin d'une fiction agréable et le début d'une réalité brutale. So it kind of translates in English and as it is the end of a agreeable slash pleasant slash agreeable fiction and the beginning of a brutal slash harsh reality, right? Kind of does the translation. I predicted this in October 2019, long before Carney was at Davos. And nothing personal against Carney or the liberals or conservative. My universal revolutionary centrism is tied. You have to tie it hand in hand with my predictions, and the reality of what's been happening in the past years, especially since October 2019, right? Because that's when a different segment of my life begins in my geopolitical intellectual work as a scholar, as a independent geopolitical theoretical analyst, philosopher, thinker, and strategist. Well, the strategies are mostly for NORAD NATO, for the North American Collective NATO, and our allies, such as the importance to revive the Genesis 33 protocol, Protocol Genesis 33, the new protocol. Protocol Genesis 33 is there's a biblical references to the twins, but it's not that mystic. It's partly, I guess, you can attribute some mystic spirituality to it, but mostly it's geopolitical in nature and real geopolitics or dragons geopolitics, right? Nobody's born a dragon; you become one. Not even myself. And I moved here, and this is gonna be 11 years ago. July 1st, I have a few deadlines. Few deadlines. I moved here with nothing, guys. Over the past 12 years, I kind of survived with less. The 11 years, let's say, I survived with less than 200,000. Thinking about that, I had to give some money back to the government, but because I had many jobs, but like many Aspies, it's losing the job. But I always work independently as an artist, as a YouTuber, also. And I like to volunteer and I'll be charitable. I'm not totally selfless. No, don't pretend to be totally selfless. I have no pretense whatsoever in regards to that because I love wafers, taking baths. And by the way, I have to mention that if you're 18 plus, you have to be 18 plus for that play. If you're black, white, or rainbow, or a man or a woman, I'm upgrading, updating from friends with benefits. Now I use friends with services. You service me, I service you. Friends with services. Because otherwise, I don't need. I don't need. I'm pretty joyous, happy as a person, and I don't like violence. I don't. I do not like violence. Violence, it's we channeled it in North America. We have the sports leagues and the NHL, NFL, and maybe have to finance women's sports a little bit more, eh? Owners and players to support a little bit of the PVHL, Professional Women's Hockey League, and women's basketball. My favorite sport is dancing. So if you want to dance, I'm always willing to dance and rock and roll and geopolitics. That's pretty much what I do daily, my routines with my marches and my meditations and my work. But I'm financially stressed, but I gotta be grateful. I got coffee. I got some coffee, two types of coffee. I got instant, I got sugar, I got the chocolate bar I ate it yesterday. But I have some halva, so thank you for the donation. I got some romaine lettuce, so I'm good to go on that. So geopolitics, as it is today, we have to implement my Trinity of trees across North America and expanding them if necessary. So the points that I want to discuss today is for Canada, the economic financial situation, and I've just listened today, earlier this morning, that the Bank of Canada is probably going to hold us the interest rate steady. I have a debt of $10,000 myself. I have a $10,000 debt. So of course I do have a $10,000 debt. So that is my debt, $10,000, right? So of course, because I do have a debt, a $10,000 debt, that is of course where I have the debt which has been of course concorded with. So I have a $10,000 debt, right? That's my debt, 10,000. I pay some interest on it, and implementing my DRT and setting a maximum interest rate of 10% will be best to move forward for the 21st century. And the reality that I just see now for Canada, for the food banks are increasing in demand, right? The food bank usage has more than doubled in 7 years. So that is quite alarming as a statistics, right? And a lot of Canadians have nostalgia for the past. I don't, because my past, going in my past, was worse. I was living in an underground basement a few kilometers miles in Côte des Neiges, still on the island of Montreal. Small, moldy. I didn't even have a bathtub. I did not even have a bathtub. I have a bathtub now. I took a bath yesterday to substitute for a massage therapy that I can't afford. But you know, that was a moldy place. Such moldy. I didn't even have a proper kitchen. The kitchen was in the room. The kitchen was where I was sleeping. Basically, I had a stove top, so it was so small. So basically, when I go back in time, my life was pretty nightmarish, pretty horrible. Losing friends, losing jobs, and living with my scars, with my, I guess, PTSD trauma, because I have these flashes. I was kind of flashbacks from more than 12 years ago. I was at one point on the ground. It was like dawn, sun, dawn. Just before the sunrise. It's like dawn, and I was getting kicked downtown Montreal by this group of people were kicking me, on the floor, pack, 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 like that. I got up and I went home. I was getting kicked. I don't know if I was on drugs or if I was a junkie before. I don't know. I don't do drugs. I even have a joint that I rolled 3 years ago. I guess it was Bill Gates or Elon Musk or both together with before I fight Donald Trump in a boxing match. Because since 2018, I've been challenging Donald Trump to a boxing match on the Canadian-U.S. border, and I've been calling for the building of the biggest ever sports coliseum arena ever built. Mass finance is a mass public-private partnership. Canada, United States, and the Canadian-USA border in order to get rid of the border and fuse according to my principles. But I have a good memory of the past 11 years, 11, 12 years, just before February 2014, which is a long time ago. It gets a bit foggy, blurred. And before October 2013, it goes like on a blackout. But I survived a vicious, murderous, homicidal surprise attack. I went to the Jewish General Hospital, bloodied up. I was hit in the head, hit my head on the concrete, and that was the doctors proceeded. And I had a severely dislocated right shoulder. The doctors cracked it back, and I was given a removable cast, and I was given some medication, some meds. I want to retrieve the archives and know what were those. What was the medication? Were they for regenerating, restructuring the bone structure, to restructure the proteins, to restructure the muscle tissue, the bones, or was it for pain? Were they opioids? And if back then I was consuming alcohol, I don't drink much today, very rarely, once on the Sabbath, usually a glass, 2 glasses of wine, that's enough for me. Three, I'll go to bed, three max. But I don't know if because I have trouble remembering my personal life memories. Before, it doesn't really matter. I'm not that person anymore. It's just I have a deadline. I'm gonna retrieve the archives by July 1st at the Jewish General Hospital to see when did I go, and thank you doctors there who the Jewish General Hospital performed that procedure. And maybe the medication, if I was taking the meds that they were prescribed and I was drinking and doing other drugs, maybe that's cause of some memory loss, but it doesn't really matter. A good memory of the past 11 years, of the past 12 years, and moving here, getting out of depression in 2017 by crossing Canada coast to coast. So that's an event I always mention, because after that I started working out. I lost between 80 and 93 pounds, and I wrote theoretical paper for the mass public-private partnership in order to need, of course, the mass financing of citizens across the North American Collective, for the mass financing, of course, of citizens protocols and citizens initiatives, of course, for the mass tourist initiatives, of course, in order to be relegated to the general overall wellness of the citizens, and of course to have the relationships which we have now today. So that is just the relationship of existing now today as an independent citizen and as our North American collective, with my experiences also birthing these a little bit more scholarly academic papers, such as the mass initiative and public-private partnership for the mass financing of the collective general wellness by financing fitness, sports, and tourism. It's a more academic title, but that's basically the reality of it. So we need to mass finance fitness, and we will, and tourism. The Imperial Tourism Ministry Department is going to be founded by as a mass public-private partnership by implementing my DRT to create the UE, Universal Exchange Unit. So back to the problems we're facing now. We're facing a food security crisis in Canada, parallel to the opioid and other crises and the national emergencies. And mass espionage. And another worrisome development was in the news that supposedly a gang called the Bishnoi Gang. The Bishnoi Gang supposedly have the number was more than 1,000 foot soldiers across Canada, ready to strike. Like that was worrisome, really, because I always say for the North American collective, we're a diverse population. You know, my brothers and sisters who are blacks or different colors, neurodivergence like myself, people on who are LGBTQ. We made tremendous progress, and for example, the vicious, murderous, homicidal surprise attack that I survived, that would have been an expulsion from any sports league, an automatic for life expulsion, right? For that individual. And even those who were kicking me when I was down on the ground, then that would have also been an automatic expulsion. That's why my imperial sportsmanship citizen conduct protocols, imperial sportsmanship citizen conduct protocols, which I've discussed in the past, that will be implemented when we fuse Canada and United States into 63. Granddaddy Trump maybe not one, because we got 10 provinces, 3 territories, best 13, like the original 13. Just 13 like the original 13, 50 plus 13, 63, let our empire rise and be. But nonetheless, myself, I don't like violence. I am, can be, I guess, intense or hyper vigilant and alert with PTSD, but I don't like violence. It's, we have sports, we have football, gridiron, which I love, said hot, 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 but keep it sportsmanship, you know? So keep it sportsmanship, with we can do it. It will require mass financing of fitness, of tourism, of dancing, right? Because we made it so far here in the North American Collective, and here in La Belle Province, we made the great linguistic compromise. It took some effort, but it also requires an effort from the individual, right? From the individual, right? Yesterday, from the individual, right? And the collective, just like the environmental work. Environmental work, the individual has to do also the proper way, because you see on my videos I go, and this is why we need the DGA Dancing Goddess Army to do education and to do, of course, to do environmental cleaning as well, right? Because you see that many, actually, almost all that I check, and you can see on my videos, I check in the garbage or in the recycling, there's things in the garbage that should be in the recycling and not put in the garbage. And we have in Montreal is a big like type of like Montreal is kind of like a big like a country, small country, the island of Montreal. So you see in my videos that I look in the garbage and you see cans, you see paper, you see plastic, you see things that should be in the recycling. So the individual, instead of putting in the recycling, he threw them in the trash. So it also requires individual action for the environment, individual and collective, collective and individual, right? Now discussing back to geopolitics and this alarm, and of course I go back to the RCMP report of the few years ago, the RCMP report, which was basically redacted. A lot of it was redacted, but in March 2024, it was made public in Canada, Canadian national news, the big news. It was discussed in the newspapers and online, and of course, it was discussed by the media. So they were warning of coming unrest, and they didn't really use the words riots, but maybe in the redacted parts, they were warning of geopolitical events, the deterioration of socio-economic, basically financial and economic problems that many Canadians are facing, and it's unprecedented. Even this morning, I was looking at. I never heard anything like I heard this morning in since recent memory of the past more than 11 years, 12 years. I never heard anything such that 2/3, 66% of Ottawa, the national region, are financially stressed. 66% is it's just a 2/3, the vast majority, right? So it's just doesn't the math. It's we have if we have to pay interest, that can be problematic. If interest payments add up, they can suck the wealth from buying food, buying socks, buying paper, paying bills. And I gotta give a shout out. I paid my rent, paid my electricity bill. Always pay my rent first, the electricity bill. Then I paid Netflix special. I paid my internet, and that's the rock and roll. My phone, I can wait until July. I don't have to pay it. I can wait until July. So my phone bill, I don't have to pay it. But it's an affordable one. I don't have a fancy. I pay less. I'm gonna just say I pay less than $30 monthly. Less than $30 monthly for my phone bill. But I can I have a good plan. I don't need that much for now. I don't. I get back to geopolitics. So another point I want to mention is super important that was in the news lately: the increasing nuclear development of China, right? And unprecedented. China has never developed, improved, and nuclear warheads and ICBMs such as it has after COVID. Now, there's something there, and it seems that they're mass investing in warheads, nuclear warheads, and nuclear capabilities, even building, constructing more nukes. They're building, constructing more nukes at an alarming rate. You wonder, hey, that's something that has to be concorded with Xi Jinping's positions and official position vis-a-vis Taiwan as well, right, and vis-a-vis its neighbors. But I don't know, they're increasing their nuclear capabilities very fast, mass investing in it. Of course, if you want to discuss China, you have to know a little bit about the governance of China. Because I remember like 2 years ago, I had to say to a fellow citizen who wanted to discuss China, I mentioned governance of China and said, I don't know what that is. I'm not aware of that. And I'll have to decline a discussion on China as it is today. Xi Jinping's China, and Xi Jinping has been the leader, paramount leader, as they're called, of China, the leader of China, chairman of the secretary general, basically their chief, their leader, Xi Jinping. And the governance of China has several volumes which explain the policies, protocols, ideologies, philosophies of Xi Jinping's China, of why they're building socialism with Chinese characteristics. See, socialism with Chinese characteristics has to also be understood for what China became today in the 21st century, a superpower, without a doubt, a superpower in its vast economic, commercial, and industrial, and even rare earths. Eh? Rare earths been corner kind of the market in rare earth, and what it became in the past, especially during Xi Jinping's rule, and in the 21st century, or in the 21st century, China as it is today as a superpower, right? And their mass infrastructure projects as well have to be, and their mass urbanization, right? Their cyberpunk-like cities. I never been, so I have no business interest in China whatsoever. I'm not getting any private sponsorship, any of the such at the moment, right? But perhaps it is a civilization that many of us we do not fully understand, in essence, right? Perhaps a civilization we don't fully understand as much as we want to, even translating the words, right? When in the governance of China, and Xi Jinping mentions that they're building a socialist spiritual civilization. Now, a socialist spiritual civilization, when you mention spirituality, for me at the table, it's God, goddess, a little bit of mystic, Tell them on 93, Alistair Crowley, bury me with Papa Crowley, and send me in. That's the city of the pyramids. But besides that, I can be a universal world citizen. But it's been 7 years I didn't even leave the island of the Hawk here, Montreal. So that aspect has to be understood also from the perspective of their growing alliance, military financial alliance with Russia, and what I call their mutual twin geopolitical interest. Their mutual twin geopolitical interest as they converge in Taiwan for China and in Ukraine for Russia. And both China and Russia, they have a vested interest to overtly or covertly support Iran with armaments, munitions, intelligence, overtly or covertly. Satellites, maybe satellites and ICBM rockets or secret agents, right? They have an overt and covert motive, and this is tied to the DMAA in many ways for other countries, what I call the direct military assistance and action, as it relates to NATO member countries assisting militarily, not financially in a humanitarian manner. I discussed it in the past. If you want to commission a work on the DMAA, it's a bit academic, intellectual, but it's not just a theory. The DMAA has to be applied for NATO-centric member countries and for the Imperial Republic as a whole in the future collectively. So that relationship which we have today is, of course, the growing relationship with the growing problems that are being caused by the blocking of the Strait of Hormuz. Now, if the Reds, the other strait is also blocked, there will be a double trouble, twin problems. But the Strait of Hormuz also is costly to the fertilizer because many countries are also growing the food and they can't have access to the fertilizer to grow the crops. So that can be another problem for food security worldwide, globally. Now, many countries are also in an emergency gas. Hey, they're running out of gas. They have, and we might be running out of gas in July. In theory, the Athabasca tar sands of Alberta could provide oil, but of course, my position is transition, transition, transition. Solar and hydro, solar and water, fire and water. Because here in Quebec, I'm doing this video and all the electricity that we're using. I gotta salute the Hydro Quebec workers of the past. We got 63 generating power stations. 63, just like the 50 states. Always rock rolling for my brothers and sisters in the 50 states, 10 provinces, and 3 territories. We got 63 generating power stations. 63 generating power stations. Provide clean zero pollution energy emission. Eh? Think about that. Thank you to the ones who build it. Eh? It's guys, decades and decades and decades of work. Eh? And just the sewers, the sanitation system. That was my thesis back in 2023. I presented to the world. Civilization is a privilege. Civilization is a privilege. So that's why, because we all have it, rich and poor and tall and small and neurotypical, 99 percenters of you neurotypicals. I don't have antagonistic resentful feelings, not whatsoever. I'm part of the tiny small minority. I'm this tiny small minority which I love, and spectronites, Aspies, and autistic people who can be vulnerable. I learned the hard way my vulnerabilities, and to become more aware. Sometimes we can learn the hard way, self harm and depression, suicidal, bullying, and but rock and roll, So that's where we are. But rock and roll also, the rock stars. You also have owners of the NFL, NHL, and MLB, and millionaires, billionaires. Give some charity and support the dream of mass public-private partnership. We need to finance fitness across Canada, United States, both. We need to, for the total SSSD security service and surveillance protocol, it will require my brother Scorpio Bill Gates, Palantir, Flock Safety, Palantir, and Peter Thiel. Me and Peter Thiel can dance, I guess, a little bit of good dance, because from what I hear, Peter Thiel is part of my fellow LGBTQ community as well. So we got to rock and roll. But in a parallel life, I build satellite supercomputers, microchips, and I live in the year darkness 2030. I'm a super scientist there, one of the top in the world, actually. Kind of like a mixture of Stefano Dobleja and Claude Shannon and Bill Gates and Elon Musk. Anyways, here I feel is rock and roll and geopolitics. So there's the twin interest for China and Russia to support Iran as much as they can. So reminds me of a document that I started writing after most of my work is post my depression 2017 summer, when I crossed Canada coast to coast with my anonymous friend. If I make a million, I'm going to give her half of a billion. Of course, a million doesn't turn into a billion because it has 6 0 compared to 9 zeros. A trillion has how many zeros? How many kisses I got? Trillions by the goddess. But marching steps, rock and roll, I'm a piece of dust. Don't worry about me. But the rock and roll that I sing is kind of great. And, it's, I have hope in the youth as well. I have great hope that my Trinity of theories will be implemented, because we have to get going with it. And it's something which we have to channel. Like I just said, the aggression and violence. I don't like violence, but I'm for defensive purposes, coast to coast, ocean to ocean. My protocols are defensive, DDD, right? Across the North American Collective and beyond. And of course, that is just the relationship of where we are now today in the sphere of the civilizational complex of North America and beyond. And of course, we have to get the relationships of existence today and living for tomorrow. So that life affirming situational awareness of where we are to secure and defend freedom and liberty, and my reforms best, such as the 911 Total North American Dragon Collective, the North American Dragon, or the 911 Dragon North American Collective Security Services Surveillance and Defense Protocols, basically for police reform, and fuse the RCMP and the FBI into the CPS, Citizen Police Service, because they serve the same functions. Fuse CSIS and CIA, which serve the same functions, Central Intelligence Agency and Canadian Security Intelligence Service, CSIS and CIA, into the Imperial Security Integrated Service, CIA and CSIS into the Imperial Security Integrated Service, and of course, mass finance fitness across North America, tourism, and build the Forgotten Goddess Temple. She doesn't need me to build her temples because I'm a piece of dust, but she's got the pyramids. But I will to build it 11 times bigger than the St. Joseph's Oratory, and to build together the 11 times bigger than the Caesar Superdome, or Super Bowl 47. One of my top favorite Super Bowls is Super Bowl 47, was fought, played, battled out, as many Super Bowls, and other Super Bowls were fought, played, battled out there. But of course, we have to integrate it and build on the Canadian-U.S. border. Of course, close to the Great Lakes, the biggest ever sports arena coliseum ever built. The biggest ever sports arena coliseum ever built on the Canadian-U.S. border, the Great Lakes, near the Great Lakes. And of course, that is just the representation of where we have to do it now today in their sphere of to move forward in the 21st century. So of course, now is the relationship of where we have now the integrated manner, of course, to be in all the aspects of our civilizational complex, whether social, cultural, and of course linguistic, and a part of protection for the minorities such as myself, being part of the tiny minority of Aspies and LGBTQ. Actually, Aspies were less than 1%, but more and more are out of the closet. So the reality of the LGBTQ community is that there's many, even in the NFL, National Football League, NHL, National Hockey League, NBA, National Basketball Association, MLB. But it's a process, it's a process, and it's not only sexual liberation and all these understandings of our natures. Maybe I'm good at some things more than others, but we can serve, and in different ways, and it's an integral part of our being, physicality. And I certainly am open to friends with services if you're 18 plus, and just clear discussion and writing maybe on paper, because for Aspie sometimes it's clear on paper, do's and don'ts, and I serve you, you serve me. Otherwise I don't need friends with services only. But that's black or white or rainbow, man or woman for me, and I'll be more than happy to be open armed with that. So rock and roll. But otherwise, it's also in parallel with my work, the dancing goddess in the Dragon Kingdom, and auctioning everything that I'm wearing here now. 1 million. This is for 1 million. This is 1 million. The pants are 1 million. The hat 1 billion. Gonna give half 50% to my anonymous friend. Actually, I will to buy my anonymous friend a house. I would buy her house today if I could. I can't. And I was very sick. I was feeling for a few hours this morning. I was coughing and phlegm, but I guess with the coffee now it's a bit better. But I still feel like kind of here by throat. I was spit a bit, and I almost vomited, but I didn't vomit. But almost, I felt like I guess I feel better when I get going a bit, or kind of I'm fighting it a bit. I'm sweating a bit. Maybe some germs, bacteria, microbes. But back to geopolitics. So we have this intersection, and of course, it makes me think of a document which I started writing about 2017, which was more positive attributions. It was called the Mass Initiative and Protocol for the Mass Financing across NATO member countries via public-private partnership for the peaceful reconciliation with non-NATO member countries, diaspora communities, non-NATO member countries, diaspora communities. Because if you know that NATO countries, of which now we have 32, with the Sweden being the latest one, we have a common collective security protocol. So, for example, to travel between NATO countries or for different works in security, armed forces of NATO member countries, or in security forces, police forces, or Interpol, what have you, between NATO member countries, there's a common more security clearances, the security clearances, right? So these security clearances, as they're integral to NATO, have to be acknowledged, and that was a document which I've written in parallel. So it makes me also parallel with the warnings of the RCMP from about a decade ago, if you go back, of the growing transnational criminal syndicates that are operating in Canada. And it's an alarming way, because the more and more I say that fentanyl seems more like it's a like an induced bioweapon, because it doesn't make sense that so many people are dying and we have so many overdoses from fentanyl. Because think about it, a drug dealer, from what I know, would want the person to keep buying drugs to make him wealthy, him, her, the drug dealer, wealthy, to buy 44 houses and 7 planes and 11 cars, what have you. But since a lot of people are dying, they're not really the clientele, right? It's like a negative mathematical attribution. So thinking about it mathematically, I don't know. I even rolled a joint 3 years ago. I still have that rolled joint for 3 years ago, so I haven't smoked. Here it's legal. Cannabis is legal coast to coast. It was legalized in 2018 under Justin Cousin Trudeau. But I do not smoke much. I don't smoke much. Actually, I haven't smoked in years. And cigarettes, my last cigarette was 2017. So last cigarette was 2017. So I don't smoke cigarettes. And like I said, before 2014, before October 2013, I don't know if I was. Maybe I was a junkie. Maybe I was killing myself and my aspiness with drugs and alcohol, and maybe, I don't know. Sometimes memory comes back. It doesn't matter. I died so many times. I died even COVID. I had it. 2020. Here, I thought I was gonna die in February. Last week of February, first week of March. Thank you, anonymous friend. And again, if I make a bill, I'm gonna give her half. Buy her a house, because she was doing medicaments and compresses, and she was doing. He was providing medicaments and putting hot water with hot teas and hot coffee. Not coffee, really. More teas, more hot ginger water with honey. That helped a lot. So she helped me survive, and I got triple vaxxed. Triple vaxxed. Yeah, I survived COVID, and now with the hantavirus and Ebola, is it mutating Ebola there? And has it spread? Is it spreading Ebola? Is it possible to spread and mutate and become airborne? Those are, I guess, more questions of concern that I have, but they're valid questions, eh? Because they just had COVID in 2020, and it's still people who live with long COVID, which is quite worrisome. So I always, you see for years and years and years in my videos that when I go outside, sometimes I go to the bank and I keep the protocols of COVID. I open carry my disinfectant. I think I have to fill it up. I have the. Actually, I'm gonna do it now if you don't mind, because I might forget. So it's better now that I reminded myself that I'm just gonna do it, because sometimes with my Asperger's I have these routines, and I remind myself I have to be on it. I have to be on it as soon as possible. It's best, to not procrastinate, especially now since I was feeling sick. I started feeling a bit sick last night, so I'm gonna fill it up. And this, yeah, I have for a few months. This is supply. This was a liter. It's Canadian made. See, got the maple leaf Canadian, and it's antiseptic. Antiseptic hand sanitizer gel. Antiseptic hand sanitizer. Antiseptic hand sanitizer. Canadian antiseptic hand sanitizer. Made in Canada by Canadians for Canadians. I got the maple leaf tatted up there. Supposedly I got it in 2023. Correction. It's been 23 years. I got it in 2003 when I graduated high school. Canada. The maple leaf with the word Canada, but it's Canada, right? In the native language. Salute to my brothers and sisters, fellow indigenous, coast to coast, ocean to ocean, brothers and sisters, natives, and all who come to join us here. And, for reconciliation, it would be best that we get a republic and as soon as possible, because the King of England, and his heirs. That should have been in the 20th century. It's important also for reconciliation, and we need a grand new covenant treaty from atop the mountain, Mount Royal, for the 50 states, 10 provinces, 3 territories, and to move forward in a lovingly manner as well with some loving. It's not all about the money, and money enables us to buy, sell, and we have mass reconstruction to do. And I always got to mention now something that's relevant to where we live today, because of course there's a water main that broke. 1984 water main in Atwater. It is a water main. 1984 water main broke, and 2 weeks ago there were the city workers and administrators and bureaucrats were calling on us to, of course, reduce the water consumption as much as we can. I think by a quarter, by 25%, I'm able to reduce it. So there were, I applied a strategy which they called upon to, when you brush your teeth, not to leave the water on the faucet, to close it intervals, between when you brush. So I'm doing that, and I think I reduced by about a quarter, not half. Half is going to be hard for me, but by a quarter, I reduced the water consumption until further notice. A 1984 water main here in Montreal broke in Atwater, so it's under repair, and I'm gonna check with the city, and that's why we need also the mass imperial public works. It's good to have a job, and those who work, they're paid by the hour. They're not worried about me not affording my wafers, but that's good to go. So that's that rock and roll. But back a little bit to geopolitics, as I fill this up, it also makes me think again the situation that the RCMP warned us, which is the co-equivalent. The RCMP is the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, co-equivalent with the FBI. About 11 years ago, 10 years ago, 2015, 2016, they were warning us about the growing transnational criminal syndicate organizations. And of course, we have to go back to 2024, October, when the RCMP dismantled the biggest ever drug super lab in Canada. The biggest ever drug super lab in Canada, in BC, British Columbia, Surrey, BC. It had enough fentanyl to kill the population of Canada twice over. Think about that. Just one super lab had enough fentanyl to kill the population of Canada twice over. So the population of Canada times two, that's more than 80 million people. That's just one super lab. There's something that doesn't add up. So I tied it hand in hand with my protocols, the DMAA, the Direct Military Assistance and Action, which is related to NATO. It has to be implemented. And of course, Ukraine is not part of NATO, but we provided military armaments and munition, not just humanitarian. So now I'm not saying we should have not have, but just Ukraine is not part of NATO. Ukraine and Russia were both part of the USSR. And there has been some drone incursions more and more in the past months in a NATO member country, Romania. I think Romania joined NATO in 2008, I believe. And of course, they were part of the Warsaw Pact before, right, with the USSR, and Bulgaria as well. There we go. Filled it up, and it's because I didn't want to forget. So this should be all good for the summer. It's not summer yet because it's the 10th of June, but there we go. So now we have antiseptic bacteria, and gonna wash those hands, disinfect those hands as much as we can. And here we go. This I bought liquidation for $1. 3 years ago, I bought 3 like this. So this is the third one. I guess I still have like almost half of it. So this should last me for a few months. Right? Yeah, should last me for a few months. Antiseptic. Does it really expire? I don't think so because it smells so strong. I doubt that it expires. Probably it'll be good. Well, once you rub it, yeah, then the expiry date kind of goes into it. So those are the concerns that I have. That's why my protocol is best, for security service and surveillance, the new Dragon Army 911 protocols to also integrate for security service, for service and security. And the other reality, of course, is the fact that these intersecting conflicts can have spillovers, and we in World War III? This is a question. Are we in World War III, or we're getting close to World War III? And we really need to, of course, get the hawk in the Golden Dome to include Canada. So we have our common manifest destiny, in the absence of the king, and king gotta go. But because the king is absent, he's been absent. But we have problems in Canada, and we are in a crisis now. A few weeks ago, and by the way, 3 years ago, I predicted what the PBO, Parliamentary Budgeted Officer, discussed a few months ago openly, that the debt servicing, the debt servicing is, I have to cut in the services, the public services. We can't sustain it. The debt servicing interest, it's not sustainable. So we need to implement the debt refusion theory, and many citizens also as individuals, not just in the public, because that's why we need to mass employment to rebuild the bridges, the roads, the infrastructure, the Imperial Criminal Rehabilitation Act vis-a-vis the imperial financing of tourism and wellness. All these protocols have to be implemented and across Canada, United States as we move forward, and then develop the coherent and struggle in coherent integral SSD in conjunction with the security service and surveillance and defense protocols, transatlantic security service and defense complex, and revive Genesis 33 protocol. So that's where we are today, and I gotta be grateful, thankful. My rent's paid, electricity bill's paid. I'm gonna end it up here, and gotta salute the firefighters, the butchers, the bakers, the nurses, the doctors, the electricians, the how many trucks are there on the road in Canada, United States, the 50 states carrying bacon, cheese, the warehouse workers, food banks, those who are serving now in the food banks. They're distributing across Canada and the US food for brothers and sisters, the vulnerable population, and those with mental health. Even our healthcare is not doing so well. We had to cut. Even for me, I applied about more than 2 years ago for Asperger's, Aspie, some support. I don't need much support, but certain case, yes, I'm special needs, but not always, not overall. But that was the reality, and the public services got cut. So love you. Encourage you all to work out, train, exercise.